everybody hear me okay? Yeah. And thank you to the previous speakers we've had. I think often with experts, when they have got to that point of proficiency in their career, where their words come from, it comes from quite a relaxed place. You can feel that. You can feel that confidence in their words and their care and their commitment to service. I think that's often what comes with wanting to be an expert. Now, I don't know if I'm an expert yet. I've been qualified 15 years, but I was committed to being a chiropractor from the age of 5. So when I was at school, and they'd say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm from Ireland. And chiropractic was quite new in Ireland. My dad was one of the first chiropractors. And so when I was 5, I put my hand up and said, I want to be a chiropractor. And they go, what? And I loved that they didn't know what that was. So some of you will know what chiropractic is, and some of you may not or have a vague idea. So basically we specialize in the musculoskeletal system. And our training is, there are a couple of colleges in the UK, in Bournemouth and at Glamorgan University in Wales. And the studies, we study for 5 years full time. And the first 3 years are basically covering the grounds of what a medical degree would be, and learning pathophysiology and anatomy. But the last 2 years are really specializing in the hands-on care of the spine, and also getting to know the neurology well, because when you work with the spine, you influence the neurology. And that was the part within chiropractic that really got me. I wanted to get to the root of what influenced people's function. And by influencing their function, their lives changed, and who they were changed. And so as you sit here now and you listen, if you can become aware of your own spine, maybe just take a moment. Have you know, when so much of our time we spend in our heads and communicating through our mouths, and our senses are very head focused, that we can forget what's holding us up, what's helping our heart to beat, what's allowing our lungs to breathe. And so equally, if you're sitting and maybe your legs are crossed, how is your pelvis in relationship with the chair that you sit on? So I hope that from the talk and from what I share, you will have a greater connection with your own spine, and maybe a greater value to your spine. Because the spine has such a huge influence. And I see that day in, day out with the care that I offer to people. So when somebody lies on the bench, they don't have to say anything, and I can see when they lie on the bench how they're holding themselves in their lives. If somebody lies on the bench and their head's down and their hands are under, they're holding so much tension in their body. They walk out of there and they speak to somebody, and their resting tone is really high, and it's really hard to connect when your spine is holding this. So getting curious about your own breath, your own body, and your spine will help how you relate in your relationships and with yourself. And I see that, you know, especially if somebody has had an autoimmune diagnosis, it can be a very isolating experience. Because often they're quite rare, and not many people within your community have experienced that or get what that is. And so the mind talk, the internal mind talk, can actually be really quite critical and quite harsh, like there's something you're doing wrong that's causing it. And I think that coming together like you are here and now with a community of other people who get it, who get what it is to live with this, can normalize some of those darker places in your mind, that when you're in extreme pain, or you're finding your function or your capacity to operate in a normal way in your life is reducing, you've got somebody else who gets what that is. Because I think as a practitioner and as doctors, when we work with people, we've got our kind of mindset of objective outcomes that we're looking for, and we're testing things, but maybe we don't totally get what it is for you to experience this in your life. And so that is the power of community, and I find that when you feel that connection in your community, there is a lot of healing that can come with that. And I've got, David mentioned, I've got two young boys, so Torrin and Oscar. I haven't got 4, that is amazing. Luckily we've got some land on Dartmoor, so I just let them be outside most of the time, and that keeps me quite sane. I'm doing a parenting course, a hand-in-hand parenting course, and it's a 12-week course because we don't learn how to be parents. I don't know, are there many parents here? Raise your hand if you're a parent. And it's very much like you just have to learn it on the job and hope you're doing a good job. And I think as soon as you have children, especially as a mother, you get this massive weight of guilt. As soon as you're pregnant, you're like, oh my God, anything I'm doing could possibly, affect their development in the womb, or then as they grow up and who they're going to be as adults. And so I'm doing this parenting course, and it's great. And one of the fundamental things I'm learning from it is that we have got basic needs like food and water and air and sleep, these cycles of rest and activity. And one of the other needs that they're pointing at in this parenting is the need for connection. And it's not something that every parent gets taught. And often what they're seeing when behavior is playing out, when children are like really either, maybe they're getting angry or maybe they're getting anxiety, which you're seeing in children younger and younger these days, it's often lack of connection. And I see it, in the playground, in the world of kind of new devices and this kind of technological age, parents are spending so much time on their iPhone. Even when they're there and I go, oh, we're at the playground, the kids can play, and I can have 5 minutes to get a few emails done. And children feel this. They feel this loss and this drop. And as adults, we're the same. So if we're kind of sitting next to somebody on our phone rather than communicating and relating, we're missing out on one of our fundamental needs. And they're seeing with the lifestyle factors, with how we can affect the expression of our genes, connection is really essential for whether we express disease or not. These are fundamental things that we might not prioritize, and we have to almost name and highlight so that we can make a difference in our own lives by taking different action. But you kind of have to just get your head around it first. So a little bit about me. Let me see if I do this right. Yeah. So this is Doug, my husband, and our two boys, and this is my dad. And like I said, so David said my dad is a chiropractor, and he studied at a college in America that was quite philosophical in how it taught chiropractic, and it was about basically the innate intelligence of the body, that the body expressed intelligence through the nervous system, and this is how it healed. And if you address the function of the spine and the structure, you optimize the expression of the nervous system, and the body would work better. And so when we grew up and I had a headache, I would ask my dad for an adjustment. Like, could you check my neck? And he'd check my neck. Or if I had an exam, and I see lots of kids in my clinic. This week there's GCSEs. I've had loads of teenagers coming in going, I've got exams, can you just come and check my neck? Can you check my cranial bones to see that everything is flowing? And when they get on the bench, you can imagine they're like at their computers, or they're bent over desks for weeks and weeks in tension as they're preparing for these exams that come with quite a lot of pressure. And they lie on the bench, and you hold their head, and you ask them to breathe, and there's no expectations on them. Nobody's asking them to do anything or be anything, and their body can relax. And that's what most elements of wellness come down to, is your capacity to relax. Because it really affects our nervous system, whether our body is in a sympathetic drive or a parasympathetic drive. Whether it's pushing adrenaline through our body and causing our nervous system, what they show is with the sympathetic response, you get tension through these muscles in the shoulders and the pelvis, because it's wiring your body to run or to hide. And so, classically you see chronic tension, pain patterns, shoulders, neck, low back area. And so helping these teenagers lie down, breathe, relax some of that tension out of their body, they stand up straighter, they feel more connected in their body. And what it shows is when the posture is more upright, through functional MRIs, the blood flow improves to the frontal cortex. When the body's wound into this tension, it reduces it to this area. And that's the part of the brain that has the capacity to see bigger picture, to not just be in fight or flight or focused on our sense of self. And when you can access that potential of the mind, again, that allows for the immune system to be optimal. And so this picture below is of the clinic, and we've got different words and places, and one of the ones we have behind the desk is tension is who you think you should be, relaxation is who you are. Tension is who you think you should be, relaxation is who you are. And when people start care, sometimes we ask them to do exercises like, who do you think you should be in your life? And who would you like to be in your life? Because we get wired in really young to have quite high expectations of ourselves or ideas of limitation about ourselves. We can carry so much shame that we might have picked up when we were 5. You know, they say so much of the wiring of the brain and our mental thought patterns get programmed in by the age of 7. There was a famous philosopher, and I can't remember his name, but he said, give me the boy to 7 and I'll show you the man. And so it's worth it. Does anyone know who said that?
It was Jesse philosopher.
Oh, great, thank you. And so it's always good. It's always good to reflect on your own childhood and some of those elements that you learned really young that you feel maybe still undermine you today. And it's again, like it's been mentioned, about just seeing things, having that discernment of mind to not just be in repetitive cycles of this is how I do it, this is who I am. You know, they say we have 68,000 thoughts on average a day. That's, you know, we can imagine that, we're thinking all the time. But 98% or 96% of the thoughts you have today will be the same tomorrow. That is quite a statistic. And it does take a bit of effort and a bit of reflective time to be reflecting on your own patterns of thought and your own patterns of movement, which is something that underpins the thought. So as people get more flexible in their spine and within their nervous system, their range of options start to change. So an interesting example is a gentleman who started care with me a few months ago. He actually stood up and talked at our anniversary party. And he came in for care because he was at an event that we had a few months ago on our land, and he got chatting to somebody who was having care with me and said, I can't really describe what she does. I don't really know, but it feels really, really good. He thought, okay, I think I'm going to try this. So he came in, and he didn't really have, you know, sometimes you go to a chiropractor and you generally think, oh, I've got low back pain, or I've got neck pain, or I've got headaches. He was like, I'd rather not tell you too much about me and my life. I'd like you to just do your assessment and get on the bench and just see what happens. I love that. I was like, oh, what a freedom. Because often you get reduced down to the symptoms and you miss the whole person in front of you. You get reduced down to what they think is the ideal outcome, and then oh, can everybody still hear me? I'm moving away. Yeah, okay. You miss out on all the possibility, all the potential of that person. And so I started working with him, and I could see he had quite a lot of tension in his coccyx. When he lay on the bench, there was high passive tension through here. And that part, the thoracic spine, is often where we hold a lot of our protection. It's our heart and our lungs. And so it's not that I would do a lot of talking with him, but just help him connect in with hands-on work into his spine, his nervous system. And we do a set of objective measurements, like we do posture analysis and check the reflexes, range of motion. And after a series of care, so I think it was about after maybe 6 to 8 sessions, he came back in and he said, what you've done, he said, again, I can't really describe what you're doing when you come in, but when I come in, but he said, there's been something I've been wanting to do for the past 20 years. And he said, I've got a studio where I make these amazing sound bowls. And he said, I've just decided to give it up, and I'm ready to go freelance, and I started clearing out my closet, I've got loads of clutter, and he said, I'm just changing things in my life. He said, suddenly, with all this energy that was bound into my body, he said, I feel strength, I feel courage to do this. And so what I'm wanting to highlight is that our structure and our spine has more influence on how we're behaving in our lives than we might realize. I know this because I'm a chiropractor, and I love learning new things and going to seminars and exposing myself to what it can be to be as flexible in my body as possible. And from that, I see my life change. And so it's nice then to affirm that and for people to see that in their own lives. So this is what we do. It's really simple. Just establishing a baseline of ease. And maybe for yourself, what can you do to create more ease in your life? You know, maybe there's some changes you need to make. Maybe it's even just looking at your home and how you flow within your house. Maybe it's looking at where you might need support.
What's a frog?
Hmm?
Sorry, I couldn't make out what it was.
Oh, it's a frog.
Yeah,
and it's not dead. Yeah. Yeah, that's what my son saw this slide. He was like, "Is it dead?" I was like, "No, it's happy." Yeah. So establishing a baseline of ease. And we are part of nature. You know, nature does this spectacularly. We see examples of it all over the world, where if we just have some time in nature. And most people find that if they have a walk outside or out on the coastal path, it has an effect that's far more than we might realize, and how it attunes our body and our nervous system into that baseline of ease. That can then influence our immune system and how well our body works in the world. So sorry these images aren't great. I had to send on a PDF, and so it's not very big, so I might skip through some of them. But this is just a little bit about the nervous system. I mean, I don't know how familiar people are with the different levels of the spine and where they go on to support the nerves, what areas of function they affect. But it's a nice thing to be aware of. Because if you're sitting and your head's forward and you're rounding through there, this is going to influence the nerves up into the head area, down to the shoulders. If you're someone who gets pins and needles into your hands, this will affect it. You've got the thoracic outlet that goes down to there. And so it's good, again, just to be taking responsibility for your own body and know that there's something you can do that will improve your symptoms over time if you do it on a regular basis. And what I often say to patients is to do these things for short moments through the day. If you try and think, oh, I have to change my posture, I have to do all this consistently forever, it will be an impossible task, because these are habits that you have to build in. And so you'll do it for a moment, and then you'll forget, and you'll find that your head's forward again, and then you can remind yourself. And then you keep reminding yourself, and then before you know it, it doesn't feel comfortable to have your head forward anymore. You start getting the feedback from your spine, your body, that is actually compromising on the nerve flow, the blood flow to the muscles, and causing early degenerative effect. And they see this creep effect that happens in the joints if they're in a stagnant position for more than 20 minutes. And so they say for the spine, sitting to the spine is like sugar to the teeth. So sorry, I think it's an hour and a half, you're all sitting. Maybe what you could all do is clench your bum muscles as you're sitting there and just get a bit of blood flow. Don't feel embarrassed, it's going to have connection in your bum. But I do recommend that for people if they go on long car journeys, to just keep the blood flow, clench your bum muscles as you're driving along, and that will help again just reduce the early degeneration that happens in the low back area. So a little bit about the nervous system and the brain. There's a great neurologist who did a lot of study called Dr. Alf Reig, and he looked at lots of cadavers and the nervous system and the spinal cord, and could see patterns of spinal cord tension, predictable patterns of spinal cord tension that showed up in these cadavers. And the chiropractor who created the technique I do, he correlated those patterns of cord tension with patterns of behavior that people would express. And it's quite interesting, having done this work, it's been nearly 15 years I've been doing that work and continue to study it. The patterns of behavior and the patterns of structure seem really consistent and do correlate. So for example, somebody may have a pattern of spinal cord tension up around the upper cervical area, so around C2, C3 area. When they lie on the bench, and you can see this from looking at leg length discrepancy, what happens to the legs when they turn the head, because it all affects the jaw and the position of the jaw within the spinal column, and how they're breathing, how their posture is. Someone who's got a phase 4, which is one of these patterns, they will be a total chatterbox. So they'll lie on the bench and they'll just want to tell you everything about everything. And I'll have to say, just put your head down, just take a breath, and then and I just let's and so often when I take some contacts or treat the spine on those areas and clear that tension on that level, they'll often release some emotion. So they might, I've quite a few patients who just spontaneously laugh whenever I adjust that part of the spine. Others who might spontaneously cry. And this is a good thing, you know, and it's not that they need to have any awareness of what's caused that. They might get a flash or a sense of it, but that doesn't matter. The key is that they're releasing it and they're connecting within their body and they feel greater safety. And from that, you feel the spine afterwards, and there's the passive tension has dropped down, the joints are moving better, you can check the leg length, and much of the measurements have changed from that original assessment. Oh, I'm going backwards. And so some of these things have been mentioned about what can influence our nervous system. So physical things, it could be falls, what you're doing, how your ergonomics are, so like your computer desk, how your position is. If you're, for example, for me, I'm working around benches all day, so I just make sure I work one side and then change through every session. I change from one side to the other, so I don't develop patterns on one side of the body. It's the same hairdressers. I see lots of hairdressers. I'm just making sure that they bring the chair up to the right level so they're not doing things that would affect the position of the spine, because these little incremental pressures over time have really quite a gross effect. So whether it's, you know, anything that causes forward head carriage, the back of our spinal cord, these are proprioceptive channels. This is the feedback from your feet all the way up. This is your fine motor control. So when you're 80, you want to be able to do up your own buttons. These are some of the things that can be affected over long-term chronic tension and postural tension. So chemical imbalances, toxicity, so it's great thinking of your environment, what's coming in. I have a gentleman recently who mentioned he's been having a chesty cough that hasn't been shifting, and he's had x-rays and they can't work out what's going on, and he's living right by some docks, and he's just making the connection going, could it be some of the debris that's coming up from big ships coming in and out? So just thinking that, and one thing I am cautious of, even though the research isn't yet complete around it, but is the effect of electromagnetic frequencies and EMR. It's an unknown, I feel, at this point, because it's so new, this technology is so new. So one of the things for the kids is they're at Dartington School, and they just erected a 5G mast up right by the car park of the school. And so many parents have kind of gone, hey, you know, that we really don't want that around our children, because they will be the ones who will be most affected by this radiation. And so I recommend, you know, turning off your Wi-Fi before you go to sleep at night, just because it's a frequency that I have read some research that says it can affect you going into your deep sleep. It's like it can affect the nervous system and be like a stimulation that's coming in and out. Same with your phone. If you sleep with your phone by your bed, just make sure it's on airplane mode. It's just a simple little precautionary thing you can do that could potentially reduce some risk factors later on. It's an unknown, but I think it's a sensible one. And one of the things about sleep, there's some, I don't know what kind of imaging it is, but they've shown how so our brain and our spinal cord is surrounded by cerebrospinal fluid. And that nourishes the spinal cord of the brain and then keeps lubrication in there for the movement. And what they've shown is as people drop into sleep and go into deep sleep, they show how the cerebrospinal fluid flushes through the brain and comes out. And it's only when you go into deep sleep. And that CSF has the capacity to clear out toxins that are built up through the day, nourish the brain. And that's why if you've been sleep deprived or you're not dropping into that sleep, over time it can really tax your system in how well everything functions. So just another reason to do whatever you can to not be like watching television too late, not looking at your screen too late, just so when you do go to sleep, you've got every capacity to go as deep as you can for the nourishment of your body. And so, and you know, little practices of like letting your thoughts dissipate. If you've been worrying about something, if there's something going on that as soon as you stop at the end of the day, you start to feel and notice all the things that you feel you have to do, it's a good time to just have a little breathing exercise that allows you to connect in with your body, deepen your breath rhythm, so that your body goes into that parasympathetic mode, and it makes it easier for you to drop into that deep sleep. It's these little consistent rituals that make all the difference with minimizing the expression of disease later on in our lives. And noting them down, you know, like maybe you'll have new energy from this meeting, this gathering together today. Maybe today or this evening is a good time to just go, okay, so what can I do for myself? If I was me in 10 years or 20 years coming back to give myself advice, what would I tell me to prioritize? It's like I have a young woman, she's only 27, she works here in Exeter, and she's been coming in for about 6 months, and a few months ago she came in and there was a lot more tension in her body and her shoulders, and even how she was talking was kind of fast. She was just more stressed, and it was all work. It was just her workload had just doubled, and she really wanted to do her best and be really good at her job, but she'd taken on so much more than perhaps she could do in a balanced way. And I'd advised her to do that, to have a look at what advice she would give to herself to get that life-work balance. And she came in just this week and said, you know, I went and had a weekend of reflection. She just took a weekend out to reflect. And she decided she wasn't going to work past 4 o'clock. She had been working 60-hour weeks. And she was going to really commit to that for herself, because she started to notice how her exercise routine had gone out the window. She'd started eating on the run. She'd put on weight. All these things that, you know, lead straight to heart disease, diabetes. They're all kind of precursors to cancer. She's 27. And so if you're in the room and you're younger and you've got that capacity to make changes now, do it, because you don't want to be in the future regretting something that you could do that could make a difference to your well-being in the future. So these are just some interesting studies of how the measures of health can reduce as our posture declines. So they say all measures of health status showed significantly poor scores as the C7 plumb line deviation increased. So as they shifted forward at that point, they could see the reduction in like blood pressure going up, heart rate going up. Older men and women with hyperkyphotic posture, which is that rounding through there, have higher mortality rates. Spinal pain, headache, mood, blood pressure, pulse, lung capacity are among the functions mostly influenced by posture. And this is an interesting one because it's hard to work out the direct correlation, but as you work with the spine, you see the height loss was associated with a 42% increased risk of coronary events, such as heart attacks, even in men who had no history of cardiovascular disease. And for me, it just makes sense. You know, if you've got that real rounding there, it's going to cause pressure reduction on the arteries, on the nerve flow, and therefore the function. This is a good one. 2 minutes. Okay. This might be a good one for me to, I don't know if I can email out, but it's just some tips of things that you might want to look at in your everyday life that can, again, just help with that awareness of your body. Can you see this? New age of degeneration. Just again, that text neck that goes on for people, and how much more the head weighs, the more forward it goes. So I've got some good images of some patients I'll show you. So just looking at the spine, so this is a nice healthy cervical spine here in an x-ray, and that's someone who's got that forward head carriage. And basically your spinal cord travels through here. And so if you see that line, it's going to affect, and they show that on nerves themselves. If you put a 5-pence piece in a nerve, it would reduce that output by 80%. And only 10% of those nerves are pain sensitive. So often people wait till they've got extreme pain, but often the function can be affected into those muscles, into say, if it's C7, this is the innervation to the thyroid. So the first image on the left is when they first came in, And the second image is, this was just after 4 weeks of me seeing them. And in that time, I'd not only done some work on their spine, but the top lady in particular, you know, she'd had quite a tragic thing that had happened to her quite a few years before, and she was really carrying it in her body, a lot of grief. And so we worked with her, just making peace with that and getting comfortable again in her body. And as she started to come in, I could see she was actually in her body, rather than carrying the weight of the past. And you know, when I take these second images, I don't say stand up straight. I literally just say, okay, now as we did before, and they have learned those strategies, and it says 3 weeks to get a habit in place. And I show you these pictures of these guys because they're not young. You know, the top lady, she's in her 80s, and he's in his late 70s, and they're holding this. They come in and I celebrate. I'm like, you are doing amazing, and people need that feedback. And it's not just about symptoms, it's about how well they feel in their bodies. Oh, I'm probably done with time, am I? Yes. So yeah, just having some thoughts on what's possible for you, and where your head's at, and what you want to create for your body, and take some time to do that. And thank you all for your attention after lunch.